In the summer of 1927, amidst the agricultural fields outside Silwood, Oregon, local authorities responded to repeated inquiries about a remote farm known formally as Parcel 106. The property was registered under a religious medical trust, but had no recent tax declarations, no outgoing mail, and no recorded harvest for nearly 4 years. Those who attempted to visit reported a strange uniformity on the grounds, unchanging crop height, identical animal behavior, and residents who neither confirmed nor denied the passing of time. The Carter Agrarian Fellowship, established in 1912, was presented to the public as a faith-based agricultural commune focused on health reform and self-sufficiency. It advertised seasonal produce, hosted youth rehabilitation camps, and participated in church-affiliated trade fairs. Its Oregon branch, Parcel 106, was cited as a model farm in state newsletters through the early 1920s. Photographs showcased smiling workers, rows of identical dormitories, and a chapel garden hybrid that doubled as a teaching facility. From the outside, it appeared as a highly organized, mission-driven success. But by 1927, all public communications had ceased without explanation. Internal inspection logs from state agencies remained incomplete or were quietly reassigned. The Carter Agrarian Fellowship arrived in Oregon during a period of statewide transition. The lumber economy had begun to contract, while the state's agricultural agencies sought to highlight a new model of self-contained farming. Leaders within the Oregon State Board of Rural Development welcomed external investment that promised low-impact expansion and alternative food sources. The fellowship's initial proposal included schematic diagrams of crop cycles, modular housing units, and a commitment to educate youth from low-income parishes. This alignment with regional priorities granted the organization expedited licensing. By late 1913, the fellowship had secured 3 parcels. Parcel 106, its most remote holding, was the last to be surveyed and the only one not used for public demonstration. Internal records from 1914 show that Parcel 106 was acquired under a provision that allowed religious agricultural cooperatives to hold land indefinitely, provided they submitted annual productivity logs and remained in compliance with soil usage reports. The Carter Group's logs, while formulaic, met minimum standards. Yields were recorded in even intervals. Labor was listed only by first names and categorized by task. Though it deviated from standard documentation practices, oversight officials accepted these anomalies as harmless. In 1916, the fellowship expanded Parcel 106's perimeter fencing. No permit was filed for the extension, but local authorities found no reason to investigate. This was not uncommon in remote parts of the state, where low population density meant few residents reported boundary changes. What was notable, however, was that all fencing material came from outside the county. Shipping receipts were registered under a secondary trust affiliated with a medical training seminary in Kansas. When questioned, the fellowship described the expansion as a means of controlled pastoral rehabilitation, referencing their commitment to spiritual recovery through agricultural routine. By 1918, the fellowship's public emphasis had shifted to its more visible holdings near the town of Crossgate. Those properties hosted seasonal fairs, offering fresh produce and tours of the youth dormitories. Meanwhile, Parcel 106 was removed from promotional materials. Its disappearance was not acknowledged by the fellowship nor by state development officials. When asked why this parcel no longer appeared in outreach brochures, the response was that it had become a long-term facility under evaluation. Visitors during that period noted a contrast between the two locations. Crossgate presented a polished version of rural devotion, hand-carved signs, uniform attire, and choreographed morning prayers. Parcel 106, by contrast, operated without ceremony. There were no decorative markers, no visible signage indicated affiliation. Its main entrance was a plain wooden gate with a lockbox on the side. Some agricultural inspectors recorded that the interior grounds looked unnaturally maintained. Reports referred to fields where rows of vegetation showed no variance in height or spacing. Livestock rotated through enclosures with exact timing, returning to shelter at identical intervals regardless of weather. One inspector, Gerald Linford, filed an internal memo in 1920 expressing confusion about the site's irrigation layout. The drainage systems were fully functional, but he could not locate any visible water source. He requested a topographic analysis from the Bureau of Agricultural Hydrology. No response was issued. The memo was marked as non-critical and left unaddressed. Throughout the early 1920s, Parcel 106 received minimal review. Its remote location, combined with the fellowship's bureaucratic punctuality, discouraged deeper examination. When soil reports were due, they arrived sealed and typed on fellowship stationery. Crop yield forms contained no outliers. Labor rosters listed consistent surnames, most of which did not appear in any other state employment registry. This anomaly was raised once in a staff meeting by a junior clerk who asked whether the workers were part of a closed rehabilitation program. The suggestion was not pursued. Notes from that meeting include a short remark: assumed long-term vows, no inquiry required. The official position of the state remained supportive. In a 1923 development circular, the fellowship was described as one of Oregon's most dependable experimental cooperatives. Parcel 106 was mentioned only briefly as part of a list of non-public operations. No clarification was given. That same year, the Oregon Rural Fellowship Conference, held in Salem, allocated new subsidies to faith-based agriculture programs. The Carter Group received extended soil allowances and new feed tariffs, despite reporting no increase in production or livestock headcount. It was during the late winter of 1925 that neighboring property owners began raising concerns. One such landholder, Martin Hegby, owned 47 acres directly adjacent to Parcel 106's southern fence. In correspondence with the Marion County Zoning Office, he reported unusual visual patterns across the shared boundary. According to his letters, the fields on the other side never altered, even after snowfall or wind. He claimed the trees never dropped leaves. Livestock, when visible, moved with what he described as near-identical pacing. Hegby's statements were filed but not prioritized. A short reply from the zoning office recommended he confirmed that his fence lines had not shifted and advised no further action. By mid-1926, utility officials noticed an unrelated irregularity. Parcel 106, while officially off-grid, showed consistent electrical usage according to archived transformer readouts. These readouts indicated minor but unbroken draw levels, consistent with low-wattage interior lighting or temperature control systems. Technicians visited the nearest relay station to inspect equipment, but found no fault. They submitted a report to the Public Works Committee. The report was labeled Unresolved Non-Urgent and placed in storage. Another anomaly arose that summer. The state's annual agriculture census, conducted via aerial photography, included a flyover of the Silwood region. When prints were developed, Parcel 106 appeared hazy in the frame. This was attributed to lens exposure issues. However, a secondary flight the following week using different equipment yielded the same result. Analysts marked the property with a temporary image unreadable tag. This was not considered grounds for inspection, as the surrounding parcels were fully documented. Only after a procedural audit in early 1927 did Parcel 106 return to official scrutiny. The State Agricultural Review Board had begun retroactively verifying property logs for consistency ahead of a new transparency mandate. When cross-referencing Parcel 106's outputs with soil regeneration reports, staff noticed a temporal inconsistency. The submitted yield ratios had not changed by even a fractional percentage in over 3 years. The numbers were mathematically precise. Crop measurements, livestock weight, and storage rotation values were all unchanged. This triggered a provisional site visit order. The formal request for a site inspection at Parcel 106 was routed through 3 offices before being assigned to Inspector Aldrin Voss, an employee of the Oregon Soil and Pasture Oversight Commission. Voss was considered efficient, known for his methodical site evaluations. On March 3, 1927, he arrived in Silwood by rail, staying overnight at the Municipal Inn before proceeding to the property the following morning with a county map and an issued field logbook. The access road to Parcel 106 had not been repaved since the original easement was granted in 1914. It showed no recent vehicle tracks. According to Voss's later deposition, the outer perimeter fence was intact, uniform in color and material, with no weathering differences across its length. The entry gate was closed but unlocked. He noted the absence of signage or motion from within. Upon opening the gate, he stepped onto what he described as an unusually consistent surface, without debris, depressions, or boundary markers. A narrow gravel path extended north toward a central dwelling. Initial visual records from Voss's camera showed a standard farmhouse structure with symmetrical porches and a pitched roof. Windows were closed, with white curtains drawn to exact midpoint. Surrounding the house were 4 utility buildings positioned at 90-degree intervals, forming a square. Each had a similar design, with painted siding and slate roofs. No visible power lines or plumbing infrastructure were present. All buildings were numbered but without labels. He began by surveying the crop fields, noting a uniformity that exceeded standard planting practices. Rows extended without curvature. Leaf growth appeared identical across multiple plants. Soil samples taken from 3 separate quadrants returned the same weight and moisture content, recorded on separate index slips. At no point did Voss encounter working personnel. He documented a low ambient noise level and remarked that even wind passage through the surrounding trees produced a narrow tonal register. The livestock enclosure contained 6 visible animals, evenly spaced and standing in position near feeding troughs. Voss knocked on the first utility building. No reply. He opened the door and entered. The interior was arranged in 4 identical workstations, each equipped with preserved equipment, sorting tables, measurement instruments, and sealed storage containers. Dust presence was minimal. One wall displayed a maintenance calendar, unmarked past the year 1924. He exited and repeated this process at the remaining 3 utility buildings. All interiors were structurally intact, with equipment arranged identically and storage levels unchanged. Proceeding to the central dwelling, Voss rang the bell once and waited. He repeated this twice more at 5-minute intervals. Receiving no answer, he opened the front door and stepped into a narrow hallway. Furniture was clean and positioned symmetrically. A clock on the wall read 2:45. Voss noted the time in his logbook. According to his wristwatch, the actual time was 3:11. He conducted a non-invasive walkthrough, beginning with the first floor. Each room was labeled with small etched plaques. The rooms included 2 sleeping quarters, a dining hall, and a reading parlor. Items were catalogued with consistent labeling. The shelves in the reading room displayed only volumes from 2 publishers, with publication dates ending in 1923. In the dining room, plates and utensils were set for 4 individuals. No food was present. Glasses were filled with water, showing no signs of evaporation. Upstairs, the rooms were configured similarly. He found another 2 sleeping quarters and a study. Each room displayed the same wall prints, identical bed linens, and personal items arranged in the same pattern. In the study, a small writing desk contained stationery with the Carter Agrarian Fellowship's emblem. A sheet of paper was left in the typewriter, bearing a partial sentence that read, "Rotation shall proceed in equal intervals as agreed upon." The ribbon had dried. Voss documented the finding and refrained from touching the device further. He exited the house at 4:02 and completed a final walk across the eastern fields. He photographed additional rows of produce and recorded wind direction, which remained constant over the course of 20 minutes. Before leaving, he returned to the main gate and closed it behind him. He boarded the return train the following morning, submitting his initial findings by telegraph from a regional office in Newport. His report reached the Commission 5 days later. It was marked indeterminate but compliant. The lack of observable activity was deemed inconclusive, but not in violation of any specific regulation. However, due to the property's strategic importance to state agricultural modeling, a follow-up evaluation was scheduled for late spring. This second visit was assigned to a joint team from the Soil and Pasture Oversight Commission and the Oregon Committee for Rural Faith Compliance. The team assembled on May 19, 1927. It consisted of 6 individuals, 3 from the Agricultural Department, 2 from Rural Oversight, and 1 federal clerical observer. The property was accessed in the same manner as before, with the outer gate unchanged and no new structural developments. The house remained unoccupied. This time, the team carried carbon readers to verify electrical signatures and thermometric devices to track heat variation in storage areas. Readings indicated a consistent internal temperature of 68 degrees across all 4 utility buildings, despite external variations reaching into the high 70s. The electrical field monitors picked up low-level current resonance near the central dwelling, though no functioning generator or external supply line was located. One member of the team, technician Ruben Harles, noted that the field's electrical signature mimicked residential lighting patterns, despite no visible fixtures being illuminated. The team also measured soil saturation in both planted and unplanted zones. In all samples, water content held steady at 23%. Cross-analysis found no evidence of microbial differentiation between plots, suggesting no standard decomposition or regrowth cycles. This finding was recorded and placed under review for further laboratory confirmation. Upon completion of the site walkthrough, the team gathered in the central dwelling's dining room for final documentation. During this meeting, the federal observer, Marianne Delcourt, raised concern over the fixed state of all environmental and structural conditions. She proposed an extended observation period. Her suggestion was recorded but not approved due to jurisdictional limitations. The group departed in the evening and submitted a joint summary 3 days later. The report concluded that while Parcel 106 displayed strong signs of procedural rigidity, there was no indication of mismanagement or regulatory breach. It recommended deferral of further inspections unless new information emerged. For the next 4 months, the property was again left unvisited. However, in August 1927, an internal mail audit revealed that all correspondence from Parcel 106, including its monthly requisition requests, had been carbon duplicates of submissions made in prior years. Inventory lists were exact matches down to the punctuation. The discovery was escalated to the Office of Rural Records Authentication, which issued a temporary freeze on the property's exemptions pending verification. This led to the first official halt of Carter Fellowship operations on estate property. A hearing was scheduled for September 1927, during which a motion was introduced to temporarily suspend all tax privileges and agricultural licenses tied to Parcel 106 until on-site personnel confirmed activity. The Fellowship's regional administrators failed to appear. A second summons was issued. When no reply was received, the court ordered a full administrative intervention. The formal administrative intervention was carried out on the morning of September 21, 1927, under the authority of the Oregon Committee for Rural Oversight. The team assigned consisted of representatives from 4 agencies, including legal counsel from the State Licensing Office, 2 record verification officers, a facilities evaluator, and a designated agrarian consultant. They were accompanied by a county marshal for documentation purposes only, with no warrant for enforcement, as the procedure was classified under non-compliance audit. The group arrived in 2 vehicles at 8:42 a.m. and proceeded through the access road under clear weather conditions. The gate at Parcel 106 remained unlocked and unchanged in appearance. As standard protocol dictated, the team began by logging external conditions. Field growth remained visually identical to that documented in earlier inspections. No staff or residents were present at the entrance or in the surrounding yards. Within the first 15 minutes, the team initiated a full perimetric scan of the property. The grounds, outbuildings, and dwelling were confirmed to be structurally intact. The fencing had no visible tampering or repair since the last visit. Each of the 4 utility buildings was found to be clean and preserved in identical order. Cabinets and work surfaces retained the same tools, instruments, and paper stock in original placement. Nothing indicated recent or past alteration. The farmhouse's interior matched all prior accounts. The group moved in designated pairs to record any variance from the last known photographic records. Clock readings remained static. The calendar in the study still displayed May 1924. Dishes on the dining table were untouched. Water in the glasses retained no particulate matter. Temperature and humidity remained within stable indoor thresholds, with no mechanical explanation for climate regulation. The legal counsel on site, Raleen Morrow, began drafting the formal order of occupancy review, requiring physical verification of any individuals assigned to the location under the Fellowship's operational charter. According to Fellowship records submitted in 1923, the property was listed as housing 4 permanent residents, all registered under single-name identifiers: Eben, Cyril, Mina, and Dot. None of these names corresponded with any state-issued documentation or outside employment. In the absence of living personnel or updated identification, the group transitioned to an archive recovery phase. This entailed removal of any written documentation stored on site for purposes of external analysis. Filing drawers in the study were unlocked and neatly labeled. Files dated back to the property's acquisition, with receipts, rotation schedules, and weekly task lists preserved in sequential order. However, a review of the ink and paper quality suggested that documents after 1923 had been duplicated from prior years. Repetition patterns were evident in the structure and formatting, including errors that appeared consistently across multiple entries. A notable finding occurred in the 4th drawer, where an index log titled Directive Days contained hand-numbered sheets bearing unusual entries. Each sheet corresponded to a week, though not by calendar date. Instead, entries were labeled with ordinal markers, such as 82nd Procedure or 116th Restoration. Each directive repeated a fixed sequence of events involving crop monitoring, hydration rounds, and internal reflection sessions. No deviation occurred between logs. The handwriting was identical across all entries. This documentation was flagged for specialized review. The agrarian consultant, Harold Wyss, noted that such uniformity in hand-drafted reports suggested transcription rather than live documentation. His interim conclusion was that the operation, if ever active, had ceased to function under natural cycles at least 4 years prior. This contradicted the Fellowship's own status reports. By midday, the team prepared the house for temporary administrative sealing. Photographs were taken of all rooms, storage spaces, and equipment. A log was signed by all 6 officials present. Before leaving, the team conducted a final walkthrough to verify that no documents or evidence remained on site. During this review, one of the record officers, Selma Dries, discovered a previously unlisted basement entrance located behind a supply cabinet in the pantry. The access point was narrow and included a vertical metal ladder descending into a lower level. Given the procedural mandate for full inventory, the group elected to enter the basement in staggered pairs. The space was modest in size and contained one large wooden cabinet, a work table, and a central fixture that resembled an institutional timekeeping device. The floor was sealed concrete, dry and free of markings. Walls were unadorned. The work table contained only a single folder labeled Interval 6. Inside were 8 pages of printed text bearing the Carter Fellowship's insignia. The text referenced calendar conditions, repetition of sequences, and phrases such as timed equivalency and recorded stillness. The meaning of the language was unclear, and some terms did not appear in any other Fellowship literature. The cabinet contained archival boxes labeled by color, not by content. When opened, the boxes revealed stacks of identical photographs. Each image was a wide-angle shot of the property's central dwelling, taken from the same vantage point. There were no timestamps and no variance in lighting, foliage, or sky conditions. Analysts later determined that the images, though printed using different paper stocks, contained no photographic deviations. The timekeeping device in the center of the room was mechanical, but non-functional. Its face showed no numbers, only 12 unmarked positions. The hands were stationary. Inspection of the gears revealed no lubrication, suggesting it had not operated in recent memory. The team took measurements and documented the apparatus without removal. At 3:17 p.m., the group finalized their sweep. The basement entrance was resealed. The property was left in the same state as found. A formal notification of inactive residency was posted to the front gate, referencing State Agricultural Code 1714.3. A copy of this notice was submitted to the Central Oversight Office, along with collected documents, photographs, and the unnamed interval log. Upon return to Salem, the materials were divided among 3 agencies for evaluation. The Department of Agricultural Continuity received the crop data and soil readings. The Fellowship Charter Review Committee retained all personnel files and procedural logs. The Office of Institutional Land Use was assigned the interval documents and photographs. 2 weeks later, the Office of Institutional Land Use filed a confidential memo recommending that Parcel 106 be reclassified as non-rotational property pending further structural review. This status had previously been reserved for parcels affected by natural disasters or condemned through safety violations. The use of the classification in this context was unprecedented but not contested. Meanwhile, internal auditors reviewing the Carter Fellowship's financial records identified a recurring transaction tied to the Kansas-based Seminary Trust. The payment, issued quarterly, was categorized as temporal maintenance expense. When inquiry letters were sent to the seminary's financial office, no reply was received. A follow-up notice was issued under inter-institutional review guidelines. It was signed and acknowledged, but the reply contained no substantive information, only a note that read, "Custodial roles at Parcel 106 remain ongoing as previously authorized." The phrase custodial roles drew attention from oversight board members. No custodial job listings or contracts had ever been filed for the property. A request for clarification was submitted directly to the Carter Fellowship's regional administrator. Within 2 weeks, the state received a pre-typed letter confirming that all duties on Parcel 106 had been carried out under volitional assignment and that no further correspondence would be required unless terms changed. This marked the last official communication received from the Fellowship regarding Parcel 106. Following the classification of Parcel 106 as non-rotational, administrative responsibilities shifted from active oversight to archival maintenance. The designation removed the requirement for annual production logs and suspended the Fellowship's eligibility for tax-exempt inputs. Despite this, no objection or appeal was filed by the Carter Agrarian Fellowship. In legal terms, the parcel entered a state of procedural dormancy. Internally, the Oregon Committee for Rural Oversight instructed its clerical division to begin indexing all Fellowship-affiliated holdings for cross-comparison. A pattern emerged in which properties designated for public interaction continued to submit regular updates, while more remote sites exhibited signs of static documentation or repetitive filing. Parcel 106, however, remained the most complete example of operational stasis. Amid this review, an unregistered envelope arrived at the Department of Rural Land Use on November 3, 1927. It bore no return address and was postmarked from nearby Pendrell County, roughly 60 miles from Silwood. Inside was a single page of text, handwritten in block letters, reading, "They are keeping everything in its place. The time is not broken." The message was unsigned and provided no reference to specific persons or locations. However, staff noted that the phrasing resembled language found in the interval documents retrieved from the farmhouse basement. The envelope was sent for handwriting analysis, which yielded inconclusive results. No matches were found in personnel files, fellowship rosters, or local correspondence logs. The note was filed and assigned a case number, but was not publicized. Senior archivist Lyle Emberson requested a limited language review of phrases within the note. His team found that "the time is not broken" appeared in 2 archived fellowship publications from 1915, both intended for internal theological study. These documents were not part of the public curriculum and had not been cited since 1921. Meanwhile, analysts assigned to review the interval documents located in the basement identified consistent terminology surrounding rotation preservation and pattern continuance. The implication was not agrarian but procedural, as if each task and cycle existed not for yield but for maintenance of a predefined structure. One notation read, "Interruption is prohibited. Rhythm must remain perceptible." Another stated, "All units return to neutral. Intervals observed." In early December, a former fellowship associate named Delmont Crayer contacted the State Audit Board after reading a regional article about inactive agricultural properties. Creagh, who had briefly served in the Fellowship's Crossgate location during its expansion phase, claimed he had been sent to Parcel 106 once in 1922 to deliver instructional materials. His visit lasted 2 days, during which time he interacted with no more than 4 individuals. According to his statement, the residents greeted him, received the materials, and escorted him to a sleeping quarter with no conversation beyond logistical directions. Creagh recalled that each individual wore identical grey tunics with no insignia. Meals were served at exact intervals, and every action, from utensil placement to entry timing, was performed simultaneously by all 4 individuals. When asked why he did not report the behavior, Creagh stated that he assumed it was a form of ritual compliance. He added that upon returning to Crossgate, no one inquired about the visit, and he was not asked to return. This account was considered credible due to his verifiable employment records. His affidavit was included in the supplementary review of the parcel's historical usage. No follow-up interviews were conducted, and Creagh declined to provide further testimony. In the first week of January 1928, state archivists began assembling a timeline of Parcel 106's operational pattern. They noted that despite the site's apparent isolation, logistical requests had continued arriving in state supply databases until the intervention. These included minor items such as uniform fabric, untreated grain, and replacement glass panes. All requests were submitted in precisely formatted language routed through the Fellowship's Kansas Trust. The quantities requested were consistent, never adjusted for weather conditions or wear projections. Investigators attempted to trace delivery confirmations for these items. Of the 12 shipments recorded between 1923 and 1927, only 3 had corresponding freight receipts. These indicated offloading at the Silwood Rail Station, with final destination marked as Fellowship Rural Parcel, Direct Entry. Rail employees interviewed later stated that drivers from a local affiliate cooperative had handled last-mile transfers. When questioned, the cooperative denied having record of specific deliveries to the parcel, citing unfiled documentation protocols for religious trust shipments. By March, attention shifted to the implications of sustained funding. The Carter Fellowship's financial records showed no interruption in trust transfers. Monthly disbursements to its Oregon properties remained identical to years prior. Parcel 106, despite its non-operational status, continued to receive allocation under the code Rural Function Cycle. No expenditure exceeded the predicted threshold, and all accounting entries matched pre-existing line items. These findings prompted a temporary audit of the Kansas Trust. However, due to the legal protection granted to religious trusts at the federal level, state auditors were limited to reviewing shared expenditures only. The Trust's administrative office released a brief statement indicating that all distributions complied with internal bylaws and that no inquiry was necessary. The matter was considered closed at the federal level. Separately, the Oregon Fellowship Liaison Board held an internal review meeting in late April 1928. During the session, Chairperson Ely Mathis raised the issue of passive continuation, describing it as a form of procedural saturation. His statement noted, "We appear to be witnessing not the abandonment of duty, but the duplication of process to such a degree that function persists without any evaluative purpose." His comment was met with general agreement, but no policy action was proposed. One final anomaly was reported in May 1928. A junior analyst conducting file maintenance on the photographic collection from Parcel 106 discovered a set of negatives misfiled within the aerial survey rolls. These photographs had not been printed or catalogued. When developed, the images appeared identical to those previously retrieved from the basement archive. Wide-angle shots of the house with the same cloud formation, light angle, and crop alignment. However, each image was time-stamped with a different development date, suggesting they had been taken or printed across multiple days. Further analysis revealed that the negatives had been created using distinct film batches sourced from different suppliers. Despite this, the content remained unchanged. The implications were not formally addressed, and the negatives were placed in restricted archival status. By mid-1928, Parcel 106 was removed from active files. Its designation remained unchanged, with no motion to reacquire, condemn, or reassign the land. Communications from the Fellowship ceased entirely. The property's legal standing was described in closing documentation as maintained per original charter under observation. No further site visits were conducted. On August 12, 1929, a non-governmental research body affiliated with the Pacific Agricultural Archive submitted a formal request to access Parcel 106. The organization, known for cataloging non-standard rural properties, had received internal references to the parcel through an anonymous contribution to its annual call for field case studies. The submission included no author name, only a short typed paragraph referring to a location where yield is constant, habitation is implied, and systems require no labor. Citing public interest and archival value, the organization requested limited access to verify the property's current condition. The request was granted under administrative neutrality, provided that no materials be removed and no alterations made to the site. On September 4, 1929, the research team, comprised of 2 catalogers, 1 structural surveyor and a photography technician, arrived at the parcel with field notebooks, camera equipment, and temperature sampling gear. Their visit marked the first authorized entry onto Parcel 106 since the 1927 intervention. The site remained in the same configuration. The outer gate bore the weathered 1927 compliance notice. The fields appeared uniform, with crops extending evenly across all plots. A perimeter sweep showed no encroachment, no wildlife interference, and no signs of storm damage. The team noted that the grass height and field density appeared unchanged from the photographs in the 1928 archives. The utility buildings were accessed first. The interiors showed no deviation from prior reports. Each room contained precisely aligned workstations, cabinets, and sealed containers. Dust patterns on the floor were uniform and undisturbed. The team took high-resolution photographs and began collecting microsamples of wood from window frames to estimate environmental aging. Initial analysis suggested no significant exposure shifts since the original inspection. Inside the farmhouse, the group followed a defined pathway matching the blueprint from the 1927 field report. The furnishings, fixtures, and arrangement remained intact. Once again, the clocks displayed incorrect or frozen times, differing by small increments but unchanging across observation periods. Water glasses on the dining table were filled to equal levels, with no mineral residue indicating evaporation. Photographs were taken with scale markers, placed beside each object for comparative study. One member of the group, archive specialist Lenora Kitt, focused on the textual materials in the study. Upon reviewing the same drawers described in the original audit, she located a second folder of interval logs not previously recorded. The folder, labeled Relay Series version 3, contained 6 sheets with printed instructions and numbered line items. The content referenced cycle preservation, observation compliance, and one phrase repeated at the end of each page. Continued alignment is the condition of habitation. The sheets were copied by hand under low light conditions, as per protocol, and returned to their original folder. After completing surface-level documentation, the team re-entered the basement to re-examine the timekeeping device and photographic archive. This time, using high-resolution scanning equipment, they catalogued each photograph individually. The batch contained 120 images. Initial digital enhancement revealed a detail not observed in earlier surveys. In each photograph, the position of the curtains on the farmhouse windows varied by no more than half an inch. In 2 cases, a chair near the front porch differed in angle by 1 degree. These were the only variations noted across the entire set. The timekeeping device remained inoperable. The team attempted to identify the manufacturer by examining internal markings, but found no labels, serial numbers, or factory stamps. The metal used in the outer frame was not traceable to any commercial source, according to the preliminary mineral composition scan. The report noted that while no anomalous properties were found, the combination of unmarked construction and material consistency was irregular for equipment of that apparent age. As the visit extended into the late afternoon, the group agreed to conduct a light-frequency survey, aimed at identifying any artificial lighting sources or electromagnetic interference across the site. Using handheld detection instruments, they moved through each structure. The readings registered no artificial signals, but in the central house, near the second-floor sleeping quarters, a brief pulse of 3.1 milligauss was recorded and then vanished. The team attempted to reproduce the reading for 20 minutes, but it did not reoccur. The anomaly was noted, and no conclusions were drawn. Upon concluding their visit, the researchers completed a final perimeter loop and sealed the front gate. Their documentation totaled over 400 photographs, 19 temperature and soil readings, and 3 volumes of observational notes. In their final report, submitted to the Pacific Agricultural Archive, they included a summary of conditions with the following conclusion: property exhibits the appearance of arrested process. Structural elements display no deterioration. Internal artifacts indicate ongoing maintenance, though no agents of action are observed. System behavior remains unaccounted for. This report attracted limited attention outside the organization until 1930, when a student intern cataloging fellowship-related holdings noticed that several entries for Parcel 106 had been filed with incomplete accession numbers. Further review showed that the codes corresponded to submission categories used in discontinued project registries. These registries, active between 1912 and 1916, were part of the Fellowship's internal metric system for environmental alignment initiatives. The intern, unaware of Parcel 106's background, flagged the inconsistency in a clerical note. The archive's indexing supervisor, recognizing the reference, reopened the file. This led to a decision to compare entries from Parcel 106 with similar documentation from other fellowship sites. The review revealed that none of the other parcels used the same numbering structure, nor did they maintain repeat photographic logs. The language of intervals, alignment, and relay function did not appear in any other affiliated records. The discrepancy raised the question of whether Parcel 106 had been operating under an independent protocol not governed by the Fellowship's general mission statement. In response, the archive's director convened a private review session in November 1930. 5 attendees were selected based on prior involvement with Fellowship research. Each participant received a briefing on Parcel 106 and a selection of artifacts for direct analysis. The meeting focused on reconciling the site's apparent preservation with the absence of detectable human maintenance. 3 hypotheses were proposed: mechanical automation, undocumented personnel presence, or a system of conditioned repetition. The last of these, termed closed-loop protocol, referred to a scenario in which tasks were completed in sequence not to achieve an external goal, but to preserve the system itself. This idea remained theoretical and received no institutional endorsement. The following month, the archive submitted a classified memorandum to the Oregon Department of Historical Properties. The memorandum recommended that Parcel 106 be removed from general circulation within research repositories and placed under restricted access. The state approved the motion on the grounds that the site's documentation no longer supported its inclusion in publicly funded archives. All related materials were relabeled with internal tracking codes and stored under conditional status. As of December 1930, no further visits to Parcel 106 were authorized. Chapter 3. Part 1 completed. Throughout 1931, Parcel 106 remained absent from all statewide surveys. No agricultural references, public subsidy charts, or trust income statements mentioned the property. Though technically still held under the Carter Agrarian Fellowship's charter, the site's status had shifted to that of a sealed archive, a designation created solely for internal bureaucratic tracking. This classification exempted it from public utility reviews and suspended its eligibility for reallocation. In practical terms, it no longer occupied an active position within the state's rural registry. Despite this, isolated references to the parcel continued to appear in academic footnotes, particularly within fringe agricultural theory publications. One such reference appeared in the 1932 volume of the Western Ecological Quarterly, where a footnote in an unrelated study briefly mentioned a site where sequence replaced output. The phrase was flagged during an internal literature review by the Oregon Office of Rural Assessment. While the article was not censored, its inclusion prompted a closed-door meeting between the archive's administrative coordinator and state compliance officials. In that meeting, the decision was made to begin reconciling all remaining external mentions of Parcel 106. This process, termed terminological isolation, involved tracing published references and either reclassifying or correcting them before they entered broader circulation. Over the next 2 years, 11 known references were located and recontextualized under alternate terminology. Public-facing documentation used the phrasing inactive rotation site or closed cycle parcel, eliminating any explicit link to the Carter Trust or the 1927 intervention. Meanwhile, a series of internal requests were filed by junior researchers seeking permission to re-examine Parcel 106. These were routinely denied, citing prior findings and the lack of new variables. By policy, no inspection could proceed without demonstrated procedural necessity. However, in late 1933, one such request reached the Oregon Agricultural Ethics Board. The request, while formatted as a general inquiry, included an annotated chart of crop density, overlays from the 1927-1929 and 1930 documentation periods. The overlays showed complete spatial congruence. Rows, plant heights, and even shadow positions were identical across all surveys. The board initially dismissed the submission as a case of image duplication until the requesting researcher, Lionel Aldis, submitted a notarized affidavit confirming the independent origin of each file. A secondary review verified the claim. No manipulation or artificial alignment had occurred. Each image originated from a separate expedition and had been stored independently prior to comparison. This confirmation did not prompt immediate investigation. However, it did lead to a classified annotation being added to the parcel's internal record. The annotation, recorded under case heading 106 CCV, stated, "Continuity confirmed across 3 cycles. Suggest procedural lock. Observation level elevated to Type B." Under archive nomenclature, Type B indicated a site with unresolved status, not requiring physical intervention, but to be monitored in the event of secondary cross-references. In 1934, a separate anomaly triggered further review. A package arrived at the Regional Materials Archive in Salem, addressed to a former fellowship supervisor who had died 6 years prior. The parcel contained a stack of blank Carter Fellowship logs, wrapped in wax paper, with a single line typed on the interior fold: "Cycle resumes at midpoint." There was no return address, postage, or identifying marks. The handwriting on the outer label was examined and found to match none in state records. While the phrase meant little to the receiving clerk, a senior administrator recognized its similarity to phrasing found in the 1927 interval documents. The materials were resealed and transferred to restricted holdings. No formal investigation was initiated. However, a note was added to the parcel's case file, indicating that while the source of the material was unknown, its arrival aligned with known terminologies from earlier cycles. By the end of 1935, Parcel 106 had acquired the informal nickname the Fixed Farm among certain archival staff. Though unofficial, the name appeared in 3 handwritten margin notes and once on a state index routing slip. None of these references made it into formal databases. Staff who used the phrase informally were advised to revert to numeric classification in all correspondence. The following year, an unrelated inquiry into abandoned properties led a transportation consultant, Ellis Ward, to request access to files on undeveloped rail easements. During his review, Ward discovered a discrepancy in freight data connected to the Silwood region. Specifically, records showed 6 separate deliveries from 1932 to 1935 routed through Rail Switchyard B, marked as religious trust consignments with destination code 106D. This was the same delivery code last associated with Parcel 106 in 1927. What drew Ward's attention was that each shipment had identical item codes: mineral soap base, 25-kilogram cloth bolts, and sealed writing inks. The shipments did not appear in the Carter Fellowship's state requisition files. Furthermore, each listed a recipient by the title Interval Keeper. Ward, unaware of Parcel 106's administrative history, submitted the anomaly as a logistical discrepancy. His note passed through 2 clerical hands before reaching a records analyst familiar with the parcel's status. Rather than issue a response, the analyst contacted the archive's continuity registrar, who quietly added the freight data to the sealed case file. No action was taken regarding the shipments, and no attempt was made to determine the recipient. Internal memoranda advised that since the shipments had occurred without incident and posed no administrative conflict, follow-up was not required. Over the next several months, no further data related to Parcel 106 was entered. However, the archive implemented a new classification tier known as Protocol Endurance Sites. Only one parcel received this designation. In early 1937, the final recorded attempt to re-enter the property was made by a state agricultural science intern assigned to Legacy Parcel Review. The request form, mistakenly submitted through the Public Education Archive system, rather than restricted access, included a handwritten note asking whether the site still maintained predictive symmetry. The phrase was not recognized by the reviewing clerk and was redacted. The request was denied on procedural grounds, and the intern was reassigned to materials inventory. By 1938, the parcel had been removed from all reissue rosters. Its map coordinate was overlaid with a digital storage entry tag, and all former survey documents were cross-filed into non-circulating physical archives. The site no longer appeared on state-owned land use charts. No communications were issued to the Carter Fellowship. The Fellowship itself ceased filing annual reports after 1939. No further references to Parcel 106 were recorded in any public or classified documentation through the end of the decade. In March 1941, a committee from the Oregon Department of Legacy Oversight initiated a limited audit of sealed properties held in trust by inactive religious organizations. The audit, part of a broader record simplification directive, was tasked with reducing the volume of archived entries retained without active governance. Among the properties listed was Parcel 106. While its designation had not changed since the implementation of restricted status, its classification now required review due to the absence of any filed activity since 1935. The committee's charter limited physical action. Auditors were instructed to confirm existing file structures, catalogue outstanding entries, and note whether reclassification could be proposed. Parcel 106's materials were held in a sealed drawer within Subunit 3B of the state's long-term archive. The documents were indexed under numeric designation only. Access was granted to 3 auditors, Merrill Dray, Quentin Holt, and Ada Sorrell. The team began with standard cross-verification. Logbooks confirmed that the parcel's last verified reference appeared in a redacted materials freight summary dated 1936. The shipment entries were logged as finalized, but contained no recipient confirmation. This allowed the auditors to list the case as eligible for review. However, once they examined the metadata entry file, the decision was made to refer the case to the archive's original content custodian rather than proceed with reassignment. The reason for this decision was the presence of a notation in the case log. A line in blue ink reading, "Alignment not to be reset. File condition is fixed." The origin of the notation was not dated or initialed. Per policy, any unvalidated comments in a closed file required secondary assessment. The file was returned to Archive Control, where its history was reviewed by Administrative Registrar Lyman Colson, who had previously worked on institutional land use reconciliation in the early 1930s. Colson reviewed the file and requested additional access to temperature readings, soil sample charts, and the interval documentation logs copied by researchers in 1929. These documents, previously stored on separate reels, were consolidated for his inspection. After a 3-day review, Colson issued a memo to the committee recommending that the parcel not be reclassified and that no access permit be issued. He did not cite reasons. The memo stated only, "Fixed interval observation remains in place. No cycle breach identified. continue dormant registration. The committee accepted the recommendation. The parcel remained sealed. By 1944, only 4 members of the Department of Legacy Oversight still had knowledge of Parcel 106's full documentation structure. Each had participated in a restricted access rotation in prior years. Among them was Emery Vidal, who had transitioned into a compliance role within the Office of Non-Standard Holdings. Vidal kept a private index of all properties listed as procedurally static. His records, discovered years later in a mislabeled file cabinet, included handwritten transcriptions of time codes, freight manifests, and a chart titled Sequence Recurrence Tally. In that chart, Parcel 106 appeared 13 times, marked with a check symbol and a number. The numbers corresponded with the years in which either a physical visit or indirect anomaly had occurred. Vidal never submitted these materials to any official office. Their content was not reviewed until a General Archive cleanup in 1952. When questioned about their origin, surviving colleagues stated they were unaware he had retained any reference to the parcel. No disciplinary action was taken. The chart was quietly added to the non-circulating section under archive control. Between 1945 and 1950, Parcel 106 disappeared from even restricted usage. No agency referred to its condition. No new freight records, paper movements, or map overlays mentioned the location. Its coordinates were absent from the 1947 State Geological Survey. It did not appear on internal infrastructure grid listings prepared for post-war resource expansion. Among state properties, it had become structurally absent, yet not deleted. A small, unrelated exception occurred in June 1951, when a cartographer from the University of Washington, compiling a retroactive map series based on religious land use, submitted a request to view fellowship parcels. His list included 3 Oregon sites, among them Parcel 106. The request was denied on the grounds that 2 of the properties were no longer designated for instructional study. No specific reference was made to the 3rd. The cartographer's records show that he crossed it out with the notation, "No material." No further inquiry followed. The final confirmed handling of Parcel 106's documents occurred in July 1955. That month, a regional data consolidation effort at the Oregon Department of State Properties included a call to review holdings classified under early exemption codes. Parcel 106's numeric entry appeared in a spreadsheet of obsolete charter properties. The cell containing the parcel number was highlighted by the data team's supervisor, who noted the file's unusual longevity. However, upon searching for active documents, the team discovered that the file drawer labeled 106 contained only a placeholder, a manila envelope stamped "Retained under separate custody, access limited." The data consolidation group marked the entry as inactive, custody retained. The spreadsheet was finalized without incident. The placeholder was returned to its drawer. By 1959, all institutional reference to the Carter Agrarian Fellowship had ceased. The last of its public trust lands had been transferred or absorbed by other rural agencies. No living former members were documented as residing in Oregon. Parcel 106 remained on record as an unaccessed, non-transferable entity. Its physical existence was not contested, nor was it confirmed. There are no records indicating it was sold, repossessed, condemned, or reclaimed. In 1963, the Oregon Department of Archival Land Use implemented a digitization program aimed at cataloging early 20th century rural holdings into a statewide reference system. The conversion was carried out using microfilm and early electronic encoding, with a focus on properties listed under inactive or ambiguous classifications. As part of this effort, a subset of files categorized as non-rotational or fixed-cycle holdings were re-evaluated for indexing. Parcel 106's numeric designation appeared early in the process. When the digitization team requested the associated materials, they were directed to a secondary ledger, noting the file's location as off-site custodial preservation. No identifying office or agency was listed. A follow-up requisition produced only a summary page indicating that the contents had been evaluated in 1955 and placed in permanent retention, status unchanged. No point of contact or archive custodian was identified in the record. Standard procedure required that unverified documents be placed in a pending investigation batch. However, due to the absence of any property transfer, boundary dispute or tax lien, the parcel was marked non-impact and excluded from further processing. Its number remained in the system, but without associated metadata, images, or owner profile. In the index, it appeared as an unlabeled numeric anomaly. Over the next 2 decades, no further action was taken regarding the site. Across the state, land use shifted. Former religious holdings were restructured, merged into state conservation areas, or removed from mapping entirely. Aerial surveys, no longer conducted by manned flight but through satellite imagery, included the Silwood region, but did not produce sufficient detail to identify individual lots. Parcel 106 coordinates, when cross-referenced with topographical overlays from 1974 and 1980, showed a uniform agricultural plot bordered by standard fencing. No notations were made regarding structures. By 1986, the site's visibility on all public-facing maps had ceased. Internally, it continued to appear only as a non-editable entry in 3 archival databases. Among data managers and clerical staff, the entry was occasionally noted in technical memos as an unresolved record requiring caution during reprocessing. The phrase, "Avoid reassignment, file fixed," appeared 4 times across digital routing slips between 1987 and 1992. It was during a routine archival migration in 1994 that a senior systems administrator flagged the parcel entry for closure. Under new database standards, inactive parcels without verified coordinates, owner records or tax identifiers were to be purged from active memory. A deletion request was submitted on July 14th of that year. However, when the administrator attempted to remove the entry, the system generated an error code not documented in any internal manual. The error message read, "Deletion restricted. Procedural interval unresolved." This message repeated across multiple deletion attempts over 3 days. When the systems vendor was contacted, technicians found no embedded restriction within the program's architecture that would account for the message. The parcel number, once entered, could not be removed, renamed, or reclassified. It remained readable but static. The vendor issued a patch allowing the system to bypass the entry for future indexing, but the number itself remained. Internally, it was placed in a hidden table reserved for non-deletable legacy files. This incident was not disclosed outside the administrative unit. A short internal note described the anomaly as a legacy formatting issue without reference to the parcel's history. However, the system's weekly performance report continued to show the entry as active, despite being excluded from all processing scripts. The entry, labeled only by its archival ID, remained in memory but was inaccessible to modification. In 2001, during a review of historical data integrity following the introduction of new regulatory compliance standards, a task force from the Oregon Office of Records Audit discovered the non-editable parcel. While testing for untraceable entries, the audit team, unfamiliar with the site's background, requested access to the associated file. A search of both physical and digital repositories produced no documents. The property's ownership field was blank. Its last activity date was listed as not applicable. An anomaly report was issued, requesting investigation into whether the parcel had ever been formally recorded. The task force, unaware of its original charter status, consulted a retired land registrar who had worked during the 1950s consolidation. Upon reviewing the case number, the registrar stated only that the entry was part of a category we were not meant to revisit. No clarification followed. The auditors closed the report with no further recommendation. As of 2025, Parcel 106 continues to exist within the state's land archive system under fixed condition status. Its entry cannot be edited, reclassified, or deleted. No new documents have been appended since 1955. Its file drawer, if it exists, has not been relocated or requested in over 70 years. The last confirmed access was by a now defunct department that no longer holds jurisdiction over land use records. Its physical presence has not been officially verified in over 9 decades. All known observations occurred between 1914 and 1930. No enforcement action, survey resumption, or ownership dispute has occurred since. Satellite mapping tools list the area as unregistered landmass with no building identifiers. The site cannot be purchased, leased, or transferred. It has no title history in any public registry. Parcel 106 remains a fixed entry in administrative memory, preserved, unverified, and procedurally dormant. If this story impacted you, if you stayed until the end, it's because you feel these hidden truths also need to be exposed. So leave in the comments the city you're watching from. This way we can see how far these stories are reaching. And subscribe to the channel. There are many other cases the world tried to forget. But we insist on remembering. This story was taken from documents that were found. All names have been edited to protect the source.